This is Culture, Communication, and Brand Moments with Shelby Joe Long, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet, hear their stories, and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Culture, Communication, and Brand Moments is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Shelby Joe Long.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Shelby Joe Long. I'm Senior Vice President of the Strategic Advisor Board, and I have the opportunity on this podcast to talk to individuals that has transformed their expertise into an income stream to inspire you, our audience, to think about your expertise in a different way and how maybe you could monetize it in a way to actually create a business out of it. Today is no exception. We have the opportunity to talk to Barry Kinsey of Continuity Consultant LLC about how his background and expertise has led to his new business. I'm excited to dig into some of this experience that you have, Barry. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Why don't we just start? You have such a vast experience. Why don't you just start by giving us an overview of you and your business and a little bit of your background?
Okay. So a little bit about me. First, I want to say go Eagles. I am from Philadelphia. So I'm a Philadelphia's fan.
Go Eagles. Yes.
So I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, a city of brotherly love. And shortly right after graduating high school, I joined the service. So I went in the military. I served for 25 years, started off enlisted, completed my education at the University of Louisville in occupational training and development. So that actually kind of lends its hand into, what I do in my profession. So 25 years in the military, you kind of deal with emergencies, you deal with continuity events, you deal with, all kinds of events that you plan for. And that kind of lend itself into what I do, which is business continuity. So I'll start off with saying, I own a company called the Kinsey Business Continuity Consultant LLC. It's based out of Maryland, just outside of DC, roughly around about 8 miles outside of DC, in between Andrews Air Force Base and Annapolis, the capital of Maryland. And that business kind of started from not just the military, but also my expertise in the federal government after I retired from the military after 25 years. So with that, I started working for the Department of Homeland Security as an emergency manager specialist. Worked for FEMA, where I worked as, and some people, if you are familiar with continuity, especially for the federal government, they have a program called Continuity Level 1 and Level 2 Continuity Practitioner. So that's where you go through FEMA, you do the courses, and you can wind up getting a certificate, a Level 1 and Level 2 certificate. So I was actually the program manager for that program, for the National Continuity Program under FEMA. And then after doing that for 2 years, I worked for Immigration Customs Enforcement, where that was more focused on what I currently do now, which is business continuity. So I oversaw Immigration Customs Enforcement continuity program to ensure that regardless of the situation, whether it's man-made or a natural threat, they were still able to function, which lends itself to where I work at now also. So I work at Constellation Energy, which is really a new company in the utilities and industry for electricity. I'm sorry. I think it's electricity and utilities combined in renewable energies. But I've been working with them actually since August. But what I do for my business is I go out. It's more now, since I'm working with Constellation, pro bono. So I go and help the communities on the things that I've learned, throughout the military, things that I learned while working for Homeland Security, for FEMA, for Immigration's Customs Enforcement. So long story short, it's a business that really takes a look at your business processes. We take a look at, what it is that you do. What is your purpose for your business? What are your visions, your goals, and take a look at those along with your processes, to figure out, ways to mitigate if there are events, again, whether it's man-made or a natural event. So we take a look and come up with some plans to mitigate those threats or hazards that you may face.
Sure. It's well, it sounds like your background, your experience in the military and with FEMA and with immigration, all of those things combined, that you've seen a few things. Your experience, you've had a few situations confront your vision, and you've had to deal with those things. And it almost seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like many of those things are reactionary, that maybe those reactions happen after the fact, where continuity consultant can prepare for businesses to respond before, more of a preparation, preventative type of thing. Is that correct?
Partially. It's actually both. It's both.
Yeah.
So it does. You start off by preparing for those events, and then if there is an actual event that occurs, then that's when you jump in or you spring into action, with your plan to mitigate that threat or that hazard. So when it comes to continuity, in preparation, it's training, so you train your people, you train your personnel, you train, you cross train. A lot of things we learn in the military is what you do with with your business, your people, your personnel. And the other aspect with continuity is redundancy. So when we look at plans, we like to build a lot of redundancies in your plan and your business. So in the event that something does happen, you have a backup. So that's continuity really in a nutshell.
Yeah. It's with training and preparation, and then also reaction. So before I press record, we talked a little bit about the pandemic, how many industries were not prepared for the business shutdowns or the pandemics or any the pandemic impact would have on business or the economy. Can you talk about that as an example, about maybe how a business could prepare for that? Or can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I do have to say, unfortunately, businesses tend to be more reactive than proactive. But it's not just businesses, across the board. Even we are, as a society, more that way. It's kind of like, when something happens, we'll cross that bridge when it comes.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's the attitude, not just within this industry, but just our society. So, speaking of that, before President Obama, left office, we actually conducted an exercise that looked at, a pandemic. And the unfortunate thing was that there was actually a report done, and it went out, and really no one took heed to that, and that includes the federal government or agencies. And I understand there are competing, factors, when it comes to like the federal government and businesses, so sometimes those things are driven by costs. So the reality is that for the pandemic, for COVID-19, there were red flags that went out, to the public, that went out, to the private sector, and we really didn't take heed to it. But a lot of companies and a lot of people, for that matter, weren't prepared for it. And one of the simplest things you can do, even as a business, is to have insurance or get insurance to prepare for those type of things. That's one of the simplest things you can do. But it's hard to, to sit down with, whether it's an individual or a business, and pinpoint these are some of the things that could possibly go wrong. Given that the pandemic, we really haven't had a pandemic. I think, we had the situation a few years, I think in Obama's second term, where people forget we had that Ebola.
Yep.
And it didn't turn out to be a crisis, but, we kind of, I guess, got comfortable in saying like, hey, if that came or there was a problem or issue along that lines, we can deal with it. But unfortunately, Ebola is not like COVID. They don't spread the same. Their incubation time and all that are totally different. So we were, left, with our pants down. We were caught short for the simple fact that, attitudes towards things like, like a crisis, of that magnitude, people tend to be just a little bit, reactive, so, in short, there was information. We did talk about it. We did, put that out there, but people just didn't really take heed to it. And now going forward, you see that people do. And hopefully, we learn our lessons. It's been a while. I think it was 1911 or whatever when we had a pandemic of that size.
It's been a while.
So unfortunately, when we go a long periods of time, we tend to forget, lessons learned.
Right. It's also fresh in our minds that we might, the work that you're doing by inspiring people to think about these things, that it makes it's a good timing for your industry, because people are thinking about it. They're like, oh, I need to be prepared if something happens again. So I think that's,
well, the funny thing, Shelby, is that it's happening a lot more often. Let's just say not the pandemic, but you see 2 years ago we had the storm in Texas where they're starting to see colder temperatures. Something they haven't really seen before. And when you look at their infrastructure, it's not really set up for those type of temperatures. So when their power was out, in the middle of winter for 3 weeks, and by the way, we had the pandemic, that kind of made things difficult. So, when I talk to people and I explain to people that you kind of have to be prepared for anything, I literally mean you have to be prepared for anything and everything, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And, just real quick to make a point of that, and I think it was 2011, Washington, D.C. had an earthquake, and people did not know what to do. People, I think the phone lines were tied up. You couldn't even make a phone call. That's unexpected. That's something that, you've never seen in the area around here like that before. So, in my business, I'm constantly thinking emergency. I'm constantly thinking continuity. I'm constantly thinking safety.
Sure. Absolutely. Let's talk about your journey. Those principles and that experience is very clear. That's your genius, your expertise. Let's talk about your inspiration to step into entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is full of challenges and full of the unknown, and full of, you don't know if your idea is going to work. You don't know if you're going to have all these people react to it. So talk about that. Talk about some of the challenges of stepping into it. Agree that what you're doing is critical for all businesses to think about, but you never know if it's going to work. So Talk about those challenges.
Well, one of the things, and it's funny when it comes to continuity, people, when you talk about lessons learned, you also look at a lot of statistics. So the thing about my job is like, okay, with so many things that are happening around the world, job security, or especially in this industry, was not one of the things that I really had to focus on, because there was a need and there is a need, and now it's, greater than any other time. But my journey from the public sector to the private sector was actually, for me, fairly easy. I think in part, working for the federal government, I don't have to, really talk about, the geopolitical environment that we're in now. So politics play a great part into, my decision, because working for Homeland Security, working, for FEMA, there are a lot of things that you want to do, but you're kind of restricted in doing that. And unfortunately, that was one of the major things that, led me to go to the private sector, where I thought that I could be more effective. And in that process, that's where, now we talk about the positive part of it, where it became easy. Having that background in continuity, one of the things you have to take a look at when it comes to continuity, you have to take a look at every aspect of a business.
Sure.
So everything from acquisitions to human resource to supplies to IT. So having that background, you actually have a fairly robust understanding of how a business is run, how it, the key components to a business. So the funny thing is, I left the federal government at the end of February. I think it was like the 25th of February. The 1st of March, I had already petitioned to get my organization, articles of organization for the state of Maryland. And then within 2 weeks, I was out applying, for jobs as a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
I went through the Small Business Administration because working for the federal government and working, for FEMA and for DHS, I was versed in knowing what agencies there were out there that could help me to facilitate, my goal. So for me, it was just, okay, I know I could, depend on the state of Maryland. They have programs. I could depend on the Small Business Administration. I had that understanding what government agencies do in the federal government, and took advantage of that. So literally within a course of 2 weeks, I started my business from nothing to going to having a business, and that was because as a continuity planner or someone in this field or this background, you really have a robust understanding of how businesses work, how they function, and having that knowledge and that skill set just really made it fairly easy for me.
I think it's even that I talk quite a bit about with people that are in industries I have been in academia for 17 years, and that your knowledge is here, but you don't think about it outside of that industry. So I think even just that discovery or that knowledge that, hey, these skills are great within an industry, but they're also useful over here. I think bridging that gap is the one. I think that's one significant challenge for entrepreneurs, and particularly entrepreneurs of their own genius and their own ideas, is how do I make that step? How do I make that transition? And do I see my skills in another place? So I think that's really an important piece to talk about. So,
yep.
Yeah. Is there any advice that you'd have for anybody that's thinking about starting their own business, stepping out and creating a business of their own? out of their ideas?
Really, I would tell people to do your due diligence, do your homework, and finding out as much as you can and taking advantage of those things and programs and systems that are out there because they can save you heartache, they can save you time, they can save you money, and more importantly, if you have that knowledge, if you do your homework, it'll make things so much easier for you and going forward.
Absolutely. That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
Don't do it alone.
No, don't.
Seek advice. There are many resources out there to help, and
many
you can really make that come to fruition.
Yeah.
But you have to not be afraid to ask for it. So
yeah,
that has something to do with ego and something to do with like building it on your own, building your own empire. And yes, you can, but why not access the resources that are already there? So.
Yep. I mean, you look at Elon Musk, you look at Warren Buffett, you look at a lot of these guys. I can tell you, they didn't do it alone.
Yep. They didn't do it alone, and look where they are.
Yep.
Well, that's great. This was a great conversation to understand how you've taken so much experience and you have very similar principles in your military career and your work with FEMA and all of your other experiences. And now you're helping others discover ways that they can protect and also preserve their business in your own business. So I think that's amazing to hear. Where can our audience find more information about you if they want to reach out?
I mean, if you look me up, I haven't, because of starting, working with Constellation, I haven't really focused on putting any information out there other than on LinkedIn, where you can find me. If you look for Barry Kinsey, but if you search for, like I said, the Kinsey Business Continuity Consultant LLC, you should be able to find me on LinkedIn. If you Google me, you may find me, or you can reach me at KBCC of Maryland at hotmail.com.
Okay. We will be sure to include that in all the show notes so people can find you if they want to explore, ask about your expertise, ask about how you can help them in a life of service that you are. So this was great. Thank you for coming to the interview today. And for our listeners out there, I think this conversation with Barry is another great example of someone who has transformed their internal knowledge, their instincts, their expertise into an income stream. And that's something that you can do too. Just think about that, how those transferable skills can help others and serve others. And that's a way that we can do that. So I look forward to speaking to you all next time about how another genius has transformed their expertise into an income stream to inspire you to do the same thing. So we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you. It was great to have you on the podcast today, Barry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Culture, Communication, and Brand Moments with your host, Shelby Joe Long. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.